Hey everyone, welcome back to another tier list. In this tier list, we're actually going to be going over Smite items for patch 11.7. So we're pretty much going to do what we did with the previous tier list, right? We're going to go S through F. S is going to be broken, A is going to be very good, B is going to be rated good, C is going to be decent, D is going to be bad, and then F is just going to be don't use it. And then after that, after we rate all the items, we're going to go into the best items for each role, just like we do with the different characters tier list. So in any case, let's go ahead and get started. We're just going to start with F and D tier, and I'm not going to go over every single item because it's just going to take forever, but we're going to go over a lot of different items. So to start us off, we're going to go with Archmage's Gem. And the reason why I have this under don't use is because you would never, ever in a million years really pick this up versus its counterpart, which is going to be a Gem of Focus. So Gem of Focus, you're always going to go over Archmages every single time. You just do more damage. It just has better stats, does more. Lono's is another item that you would just never ever pick up right now. So Lono's used to be good a while back, but then they, like a few patches ago or way down the line, they gave it 5% reduction in mitigation. So now it's only like 10%, I believe. And its stats just don't really line up or match anymore compared to other starters. So even if I do play mage support, I'm just never really ever going to go Lono's. I'm always going to go Sentinels or one of the other ones. All right, so for Cannoneers, I do get a lot of blowback on this, but I do think Cannoneer is actually really bad. I've tried out multiple times. Every single time they buff it, I do give it another chance, but I'm still just so disappointed every single time they buff it. So it is really good in terms of cost efficiency, but I don't think the Cannoneer stats are really that good. And I think the underlying problem with the item, the reason why I think it's so bad is because its logic is just faulty. I just don't really make too much use out of the passive. Like, it's good in lane, and as support right now, I do like this in lane quite a bit, but I just don't really see it scaling that well, and it just makes my build come online a little bit later compared to what I wanted to. So I would much rather go Thebes or Prophetic or anything else in that slot. And I know you could always build those after Cannoneers, but I just like building other items such as like Shifter Shield or some other item like that. So Cannoneers, I just never use it. I just think the logic is faulty unless they like hard buff its stats, you know, make it something stupid or silly like, you know, 60 prots each or something crazy like that, then I'm just never going to use it. Sphinx's Bauble is another one I would just never use. I mean, this is just more of like a for fun item at this point. I just don't ever see you ever using it unless you're just really trying to have a fun time. So here, we're going to go up to B tier. We're going to go over Cal. So Hunter's Cal, this is another case in which it just never gets built compared to its counterpart. And the reason being is because the other Cal item, I think it's like Leader's Cal, you just get way too many stats, too much bang for your buck. If you ever go into the T1 of this, you always go into Leader's Cal over Hunter's Cal because you're just getting more power, you're just doing more damage overall. It's just way better typically. Shroud is another one. You're just this item actually isn't really that bad, but the reason why I have it in bad tier, again, you're just always going to go to the right Shroud. You're just getting way more damage off every single time. Tablet, I just don't think Tablet's really that good right now. You can definitely build it if you want. Like if you're playing Tia, Tablet's still a good item to build, but the problem with Tablet is it's like more of a scaling item, right? Like you want to scale up, and with the way the meta is right now, it's just so fast-paced, especially towards the beginning of the game. I just don't like, it's like, for example, me putting Tia low on the tier list. Like, I just don't want you playing a mage, especially a mage with Tablet. Like, you're just not going to be a character for the first 20 to 30 minutes of the game. I would just rather you not. Equinox, this item was super busted, but then quickly fell out of meta, fell out of favor after a whole bunch of debuffs to it. I believe it definitely got some damage debuffs and maybe some debuffs to its passive as well, including the healing. Gaia, so you can definitely make use cases for Gaia, but even if it's a good Gaia game, I would still not go Gaia because the item itself just doesn't really feel that good to me overall. I know other people have agreed with this, some other people disagree, I think, but overall, like, because this is my opinion, of course, my tier list, I just would put Gaia down under the bad category, under D, just because even if it's a good Gaia game, it's not a good Gaia game, if that makes sense. We'll just skip a few of these. Fey Hoops isn't really that good anymore just because its shield isn't nearly what it used to be. It still has actually pretty decent stats, kind of like Spikes, I believe that item is called, like Marty Spikes or whatever, like these over here. But overall, like, even though its stats are still pretty decent, its passive just is kind of like out of whack right now. They need to re-increase the shield HP for it to actually be good again, in my opinion. So I don't think these are any good. Spear the Mag is another one where it's passive, like, it actually has pretty decent stats. You're getting 85 power, 10% pen, and then some like 9% lifesteal. So its stats are actually not the worst, but if you are going like lifesteal build and lifesteal items, you typically are doing that on like mage ADCs, so you're probably not going to really be itemizing into Magus anyways. But on top of that, The passive just got significantly gutted, like hard nerfed. I mean, it used to be like 8 to 10%, now it's at 5%, and I just can't get out of bed for 5%. Ragna's, I've never, honestly, I forgot Ragna's was even in the game. Like, my honest opinions, honest thoughts about it, I forgot this item was even in the game. I knew Lono's was still there, but making this, I'm like, wait, Ragna's still in the game? Never ever see it get built. Has potential, I guess, to be decent, but never ever see it get built. I think that item just heavily fell out of favor. And then Pythags absolutely gutted over the last patches. The power or that you're giving now just isn't really worth it. And same thing with the lifesteal. Okay, so now we're on to the C tier. So C tier, again, for a lot of these starters, just like before, it's like if I have them in lower tiers, it's probably because you use the other starter more. So Seer isn't a bad, T3 starter, but I think the other one is just going to be better, Protector of the Jungle. Same thing with the Tainted Breastplate. Sundering Axe, same thing as well, and of course all these other starters as well. Spartan Flag is actually one that is a little bit debatable, I think, because I personally have never really enjoyed Spartan Flag as much as War Banner. So typically if I ever go War Flag, I always itemize into War Banner. But I know a lot of other people do. I was talking with Inbound about it a little bit, and I know he actually likes Spartan Flag. He would actually rate it maybe in like the A tier or something like that. But me personally, I've just never really enjoyed it as much as the other starter, as War Banner, if I do go it. So that's why Spartan Flag's under decent, because I still think it's good. Like, you could still build. It's like an okay item, but I would just never itemize into it personally. Absolution is another one I really wanted to talk about. So Absolution is actually a really good item. The problem with Absolution is it's pretty niche. So like, Absolution pretty much says, okay, if I ult, now I give myself and everybody around me in a radius about 1.5 seconds of CC immunity. And that's really good, right? Now, you're never really going to use that for like regular things like, Thor Wall or anything like that. You're probably not using Absolution for that most of the time. You're most likely going to use it, say, for example, if they have an Ares and Ares ults, right? And you want to Absolution proc and completely negate Ares ult, that kind of stuff. The problem with the Absolution is that, first of all, most ults it doesn't work well with, from what I've experienced, from what I've seen. And the other thing is, if it does work well with an ult, it's great, it's fantastic, but it does dictate and determine when you can cast your ult, right? Because it procs initially whenever the ult ability is considered to initially go on cooldown. So that's when it's going to proc or get used, one of the two. And so because of that, you're really like dictated in terms of when to use it. Now, for that reason, I put it under C tier, but I still think it's a good item if you can build it properly, right? So for example, if you're Atlas into an Ares, which you should never, knowing my other tier list, if you've watched them, you should never be in that matchup. But if you are in that matchup, Absolution is really, really good on Atlas, because every time Ares wants to ult you, you just proc an Absolution with your ult, and your ult's still getting good value from it too. And so you're good to go. So there are definitely really, really good use cases for it, but still in C tier because it's just like too niche. So we have a few of these other items. Nemean's actually another one I kind of wanted to go over. So Nemean just recently got brought back into the meta, which is really cool, but it's only 15 reflect, and it actually doesn't feel as strong as you would think it would. And so actually on a lot of supports or even soul laners, I wouldn't really use it unless they have a ton of auto attackers. But even at that point, I wouldn't use it. I would actually probably still rather go into like mid Guardian Mail, wherever that is. Oh, right here. But the thing about Nemean is it's still decent. And also too, if you're playing a character like Kuzenbo, for example, it really works well with Kuzenbo because he already has reflect, right? So it's like kind of like a good like reinforcement item. And so it's pretty much only really working super well with Kuzenbo because he's the only other character with reflect in the game. But if you build like Nemean with Kuzenbo too, and of course you have your thorns that now do exploding damage, but of course if you have your thorns, you're getting so much damage back onto them. It's insane. So that's why it's in C tier, not higher up. So next up we have Talisman. I think it's pretty good, but it's more of like a for fun item. But it's actually like a pretty well-sided item, and it does give you and your carries pretty good MS and attack speed. So mostly if I'm building Talisman, I'm doing it if I have like immobile carries, right? So if I have like Freyas or like Olerons or Souls or like Charybdises, those kinds of carries, I can definitely go into Talisman and itemize into that because they're immobile, they don't really have dashes. So the same thing works for like if you have junglers like that or mid laners like that kind of jazz. So I think Talisman is actually pretty decent from that standpoint. Salve isn't a bad item, but I don't think it's really as good anymore because first of all, I'm fulfilling a lot of those prots with like Thieves or Prophetic or whatever the case, and you can stack Salve prots on top of those, but 9 times out of 10, I would mostly rather go just mid Guardian Mail because that seems to be way more effective in keeping myself alive versus a lot of these like carries and other characters. The stats on this are just really good, and the passive is simply amazing. I mean, you're slowing them and slowing their attack speed when they hit you. It's super detrimental to them in a fight. Void Damaru, I think, is also kind of situational. That's why I have it under decent. A lot of these are pretty situational. One thing I actually wanted to really go over was Dom. So Dom is it's actually a good item, but the thing about Dom, and a lot of people don't understand this, like ADCs, is that Dom is only attributing to your auto attacks. So Dom is really good in like crit builds, for example, or if you're stacking Dom with like other pen items, then that's completely fine, right? But if you're playing like proc item build, for example, Oboe and Kins, those kinds of items, Dom pen doesn't affect that, right? It's only affecting your auto attacks. It's not affecting those items. So a good replacement for that, and we'll have this obviously higher up in the tier list because it's still down here, but Titan's Bane. Titan's Bane is pretty damn good at pretty much giving you pen, because it attributes pen to everything, right? Like your auto attacks, your abilities. Plus you get like an extra 20% pen as like a passive towards an ability, right? Like once every 5-10 seconds, whatever that is. But also too, you're getting that pen attributed towards Kins, towards Oboe procs, that kind of stuff. So that's why I say, like, when you are going a crit build, Dom's going to be better because crit's obviously auto attack, just enhanced auto attacks. But if you're going like proc builds, like with Kins and Oboe, Titan's Bane is actually going to be better for that. So that's why Dom is down here under decent rather than like being higher up. And of course, we're going to be putting Titan's Bane higher up, right? Last one I kind of wanted to cover was Spectral. So Spectral's a funny one because it's not a bad item, but Spectral pretty much serves one purpose, and that purpose is to counter crit. And it doesn't really do the best job at countering crit. It kind of does a okay job at like slowing crit down a little bit in terms of damage, of course. Like 40% reduction is better than nothing. But like late game, especially with all the pen that ADCs can go and all that kind of stuff, like a fed ADC or an ADC that has a late game build, you know, all 6 items, is still going to crit you for quite a bit, even with Spectral on. So it does an okay job, but not nearly good enough job for me to put higher than decent. And so that's going to cover the C tier list. Now let's go into the B tier list. So with the B tier list, we have a few other ones up here. I'm not going to go over all the starters, of course, but I think I think Heroism is actually really, really good. And the reason why I think Heroism is really good, but not A tier good, but like B tier good, is because it's good into certain comps that have like a decent amount of CC. So this is a support item. If you guys don't know the T1 to this, it's Benevolence. So Benevolence either itemizes into Compassion or Heroism. Heroism gives you a shield when you get stunned, or sorry, gives your ally a shield when they get stunned. And so like the big thing about this is if I'm playing, say, into a Thor, for example, who wants to like full kit a carry, they slam down on the ground. Heroism's really, really nice for that, because the second my Thor dunks on somebody, they automatically get a massive health shield based off my maximum HP, which is huge, right? It can be 400-600 HP extra late game. And so it really screws over the Thor in terms of trying to kill that person. So that's why I think Heroism is good. It has its use cases. I'd put it a little bit above decent because I think you can build it more cases than like some of these items down here. For example, Spectral. So I do think this is actually a pretty good item. Diamond Arrow is another one. So I've actually kind of talked with some ADCs about this. Some of them think that this item is like completely just like ass. I actually think Diamond Arrow is pretty good because the thing about ADC is that ADC is, you have your stats kind of separated out amongst like a lot of items, if you know what I mean. Like a lot of your pen is separated out between different items, like Titan's Bane, you have Dom, and you have a few other items, right? And so whenever you're trying to, say, create a new build or do a different build, say something with Hasten, Fatalis, right, that just recently got added back into the game, it's kind of hard to like fit in that extra pen. So what's nice is Diamond Arrow is like the only ADC starter that gives you percent pen, and that's what I like about it. So you don't get power from this. You get like 70 basic attack damage. So you get auto attack damage contribute towards your auto attacks, but you get that and you get percent pen. And so what's nice about that is like now I'm fulfilling an extra slot for percent pen, which would have already been taken up by another ADC starter, say for example Cal or Death's Temper, right? One of these two. So that's why I like it, because it allows you to be a little bit more creative with your build and like fit in, say, like an extra item, say like for example Hasten Fatalis, and we'll go over that in a second, which you wouldn't otherwise be able to do, or otherwise be able to do effectively. Time I think is also a good item. Obviously this keeps you alive if you're playing mage like Hera, someone that's kind of immobile, who by the way is also really good with Talisman, but someone like Hera who's kind of immobile, who gets jumped built on a lot, Talisman's obviously going to be like a really good item for you. You're going to sacrifice a little bit of damage, but increase your survivability, which I think is obviously going to be a key thing. So next one I want to go over is a Kaival. So Kaival I think is like decent. So right now in a lot of builds, a Kaival is like the first or second item in those builds. That and Aussie. And the thing about a Kaival is that when you auto attack enemies, you pretty much steal their power. So it already has really good base stats, and then its passive is really good. Now its passive, like this item itself, is really good for the early to mid game, but it starts to weaken up late game a little bit. And so that's when I would sell it for something like Oboe or some other item. Once you get full build, I would go ahead and sell a Kaival. So that's why I think a Kaival is good, because I think it's a really good like sort of laning item and sort of mid game item. It gives you decent power, gives you really good 1v1 box potential, and it's just a nice all around well statted item in ADC. But you're going to want to go ahead and sell it late game, which is why it's not under like broken or very good, that kind of stuff, because it's not quite there yet. Gemma ISO I think is also really good. I would have Gemma ISO higher, but I think a lot of things can actually use this item very effectively with its new passive, not new passive, but same passive, but pretty much like better. So before it was like slow 2.5 seconds every 5 seconds. Now it's slow 2.5 seconds every 2.5 seconds with an ability, and it can like multiply proc on it. So it's really good on characters like Ares and all that kind of stuff. But mages aren't going to use it that well, which is why I don't have it higher, because I think mages have to itemize a little bit differently for more damage. You can still build on mages, but not as like freely, I think, as you can on tanks. So I do think this item is actually pretty good on tanks, which is why I have it all the way up here. All right, so next up we have a Fatalis. So Fatalis I thought was actually going to be like, I thought this was going to be like an S tier item. I think this makes playing Hunter or like the ADC role a lot easier. You can position a little bit more freely. You can chase down better. You can even box in the 1v1 better if you have Fatalis and they don't. The one thing that holds Fatalis back is its stats. So they made sure not to make this item overly OP by not giving it any power. So Fatalis has no power. All right. You do get flat pen from it. So the way I like to look at pen is like you have a certain amount of damage, which is like potential damage, but you're not always doing true damage, right? And then pen helps you unlock a little bit of that damage, right? Like sort of kinetic damage, if we want to talk about in terms of physics. That's what Fatalis helps you to do. And of course, you know, its passive is OP, right? You get to auto like without a movement penalty, which is awesome. But because it's like not as offense statted as we would like, it's not going to be in these two top tiers. It's going to be good, but not the best. And if you go like Oboe, for example, and Fatalis, you have two items that are not giving you power, which is a little weird, right? Like you're not going to hit as hard as you want to. Now, obviously Oboe has its own passive that like ticks and all that kind of stuff, but like you have two items that are just not giving you power, which is on an ADC going to be really, really strange. Abyssal Stone is another one. Dude, this item I actually think is like pretty good. I don't see anybody ever build this item. I think it's because people want to build like Stone of Binding and all that kind of stuff. Arch Druid's like Erosion over Abyssal, which is completely fine, right? Like Erosion's right here. Erosion has its use cases if they have like shields and all that. The thing about Abyssal I like is that I think its passive is like really good. And it's really good against like certain characters like Yamoja that really want to regen an Omi faster, but then you slow down her Omi regen because of this. Like it's really good at canceling out CDR. Same thing against Odin. Like Odin wants to build 40% CDR and you just cancel out 20% of it. Like he's gonna feel that, you know what I mean? You're gonna feel that 20% reduction, especially people that have like longer CDR ults. The problem with Abyssal I think is that people just don't really notice as much in fights because it doesn't really have a good like visualization, right? If I hit somebody with Abyssal, I think there is like a little visualization there, but the problem is if I hit somebody with Abyssal, like you as the person don't really realize you hit somebody with Abyssal, if that makes sense, right? If you say like built binding, for example, you hit somebody, you see a nice cracked shield symbol on that person. That's how you know that, hey, these guys are affected by binding. You don't really get to see that nearly as well with Abyssal. And I think that's kind of hurt the item. So I think honestly, like I think it's a really good item. I think you can build it whenever you want to. The problem with Abyssal, I think, is that like it just actually needs a better visualization. But I have it in good instead of these two top tiers, mostly because I think that the other items, like I said before, binding and all that kind of stuff, I think they just are a bit better itemizations and they do a lot, so they kind of cancel this item out. But I do think this item is good, and I do have builds in which I go, especially against like Yamojas and Odins, people that really want to abuse CDR. Okay, so I won't really go over all of these, but I think like Ring of Hecate or Hecate, however you say this, I think this ring is actually like pretty good, and this is like the go-to ring if you're a mage ADC. The reason I don't have this higher is because you're really only going this on mage ADCs. You would never go this any other time. But if you're playing a mage ADC, there's no reason not to go this ring. It works very similar to a Kaival, but you're stealing percent power from the enemy and you're giving it to yourself. So it's super, super nice. It's like a think it's like 15-15, so it might be like sort of like a 30% power swing overall. But like, yeah, it's a good item. You just, that's it. Like, it's a good item, right? It's B tier. Like, you're going to go it if you're a mage ADC. If you're not, then you're never ever going to go this item pretty much. All right, so let's go ahead and hop on over to the A tier. All right, so now we're on the A tier. So first off, we have like Gem of Focus. I think it's a great item or a great starter. This and Pendulum of the Ages are typically the two starters that most mid laners are choosing for the highest DPS. They're going to be under very good because they do a shit ton of damage. They're just a little bit different in how they apply it. But almost every mid laner, unless you go timeline, are picking one of these two starters. These are built practically every single game, and they just do a ton of damage. And Pendulum of the Aegis also just has 20% CDR, so you don't have to say build something like Chrono Suspended, for example, which is over here. So I think both of these items are just cracked. They're going to be under very good. Boon is one that I know people are kind of like, huh? Like head scratching. So the thing about Boon is that I personally have been going it. A lot of people ask me why I go it. I mostly say for fun. But, and that's true. Like, I'm not lying to anybody. That is true. I mostly do it for fun. But I do think Boon has a lot of plays. So the thing about playing ranked is that you just do, like, a lot of random stuff. Like, there's not really any comms or anything like that. There's no structure to a ranked game, right? Not as much as you would like. So a lot of random stuff's going on. Pushes that may be happening that you don't want to happen, yada, yada, yada. Point being is that Boon is going to give me that sustain to be able to do goofy stuff. That's pretty much what it does. And it does it very, very well. If you clear a minion wave, you're getting, this is going to be some arbitrary number, but like baseball park answer, around 500, 600, 700 HP back. Around that from just a single minion wave. Maybe around like 700 HP. And that's insane to think about. And you're getting a lot of mana back. So you have like so much sustain, right? You can like make extra Phoenix pushes when you otherwise couldn't because you were too weak, that kind of stuff. And that's why I like Boon. The other thing too is that if you're lowest goal in your team, this works with like all support gold starters, you're making use of the gold passive. And the gold passive is if you get an assist on anything, it can be a minion, it can be an enemy player, it can be a jungle camp, doesn't matter. FG, who cares? If you get an assist on anything, you get 20 additional gold plus the gold that you got for assisting the minion. That means in a minion wave that has about 6 minions, you're getting 120 extra gold on top of what you're splitting with your ally, right? That's insane to think about. Like, think about all that extra gold spooling that you have that you can just, like, gain at the end. You get extra 3k pots, like, finish your build quicker, all that kind of stuff. That's why I really like Boon. I think Boon is a very good ranked item. I would never personally build this in comp, but, like, in terms of ranked, especially if you're not going into, like, Benevolence or Compassion or anything like that, and you're running at them, I think this is really nice for sustain and just for getting additional gold. Okay, so Thebes is one I was actually really considering putting into S tier. I've been sort of debating Thebes a little bit because I think Thebes has been the go-to support and sometimes even soul lane item as well, but it's been the go-to support item for literally seasons on end now. It is so good. It gives you everything you want. You get, like, I think now it's about 55 of each prot when you have it fully stacked plus the aura. And then obviously a 10 aura, 10 prot aura to your allies around you. And then you also get 15 HP 5. And the HP 5 really, really helps out in lane. Like, people don't really notice it, but it just helps out, honestly, just around the map in general. Thebes has just been such a great item. It's very easy to stack for so long. I put in almost every single support build, like 9 times out of 10 I'm building Thebes, and so I can't really just like put it any lower than A tier. Again, I was debating on putting this in S, but I was like, I don't really think Thebes is broken. I just think it's an extremely good item. Magi's is another one I think that's very good, in particular Magi's Shelter. So Magi's has 2 upgrades. Shelter also gives your ally a Magi's. Once you get CC'd, your nearest ally next to you, they get a Magi's. And this is really good for helping them tank a CC ability, especially in a team fight. So if they have like a decent amount of CC, not CC that's too easily pullable. Like, for example, I would never build Magi's against Nox, right? Like, she can just 2 and there goes my Magi's. Like, why would I ever want to do that? But against like some other characters, maybe like Thor, especially that wants to poke you out with wall and all that kind of stuff, especially if he gets like a big dunk in the late game, I might go Magi's against, and it's really good at helping your ally just sort of absorb a CC without them having to use beads. In a lot of cases, that can actually save their lives. So I think Magi's is a very good item. And also, like, most of the roles can build Magi's, right? Like, you can build in jungle, and then you also can build in solo lane. So like it has like a really a solid 3-role thing, even in mid lane sometimes if you're really getting gone on. Shield of Phoenix is old Glad Shield back from like season 7 or whatever the case. This item is honestly really, really good. I don't think it's broken, but I think it's like really good to the point where it's like, if you're a soul laner at the very least, like you should probably be going this on most soul laners every game that at the very least that are ability based. If they're not ability based, then maybe not. But if you are ability based, like Phoenix Shield is just the way to go. Like you're just getting HP back. It makes Arthur like an S tier soul laner again. Let me just say that. Now, if you are not ability based, the next one is Stone Cutting Sword. Stone Cutting Sword is really, really good. Obviously for assassins, right? It's you're stealing protections when you auto people. So like you're pretty much giving you and your allies pen versus them, right? Because they're lowering their protections, and you're also getting more protections. So it's like really good as an auto attack a assassin or an auto attack soul laner. Charon's Coin, and Upshard and Titan's Bane are all in very good because they're all 20% pen options, right? Like every single game you're buying at least one of these 3 items. For the most part, unless you're a crit ADC, then you're probably going to be going Dom. But every single game, you're buying one of these 3 items for the most part, and they're just giving you 20% pen, so they're just insanely statted. These are just going to be under very good because, like I said, like you just need to go them at some point in your builds if you want to do damage as a carry. Prophetic Cloak is under A. Now, Prophetic Cloak in any other season, well, in Season 10 and before this patch, would have been an S tier. The reason why Prophetic Cloak is an A tier is because it got a nerf recently, and they nerfed the mitigations back down to 12%. So the reason why I say back down to 12% is because originally it was 15%, then they had nerfed it down to like 12 or maybe even 10%, and then they like buffed it again to 15% mits, and now it's like nerfed down again, and now it's at 12%. So, I guess they don't really know what to do with this item, but regardless, its mits aren't as high as they used to be. Still a good item, still a very good item, but it's not like, I don't think it's broken, and I think in like the past season it's been broken. I think it's definitely been an S tier item, but now because of the mits nerf again, like you really felt the mits nerf last time they did it, so you're feeling it again, if that makes sense. So I think it's like down to an A tier, very good. Obviously still a very good item, just not all the way up at S and broken. Relic Dagger and Binding, also two very good items. Relic Dagger is insane, I think. You never want to go the left Relic Dagger glyph, by the way. You always want to go Eldritch Dagger, which is the top right one, like the purple one. That one is going to give you extra prots and also allow you to see wards around you, which is really nice after using a relic. But also, low-key, here's a hidden tip. Speaking of low-key, you can actually see invis characters that are right next to you too. So it doesn't say it on the passive, and I actually made a video about this. But if you do have Eldritch Dagger and you use a relic, you can actually see invis characters that are kind of like around your area for a little bit as well, as long as you can see wards. It pretty much has the same passive, like the same ward effect passive, but also for invis characters. But in any case, though, this item is going to allow you to have your relics on a 15-second faster cooldown, which is just absurd. It gives you so much HP. It gives you cooldown. It's honestly just an insane item. And of course, once you go Eldritch Dagger, like you're getting what 15-20% procs, something like that. So you're getting like protections too, right? Like a lot of them for a little bit. So overall, I think this item is insanely statted. Binding is very, very good. You almost like, speaking of the stone tree from earlier when we were talking about Bezel Stone, you're almost always going Binding, I think, in most games. Especially if you are building something on the stone tree, you just kind of reducing an enemy's protections when you hit them with CC. It doesn't just have to be hard CC. Slows work for Binding too, guys. Some people don't know that. Actually, a lot of people don't know that. Slows work for Binding. If I just slow somebody, say with Atlas 3, right, Atlas Dash or something like that, they get the Binding proc on them. It's insane. And there's like no cooldown or anything like that. It's wild. So like just reducing an enemy's protections, I think it's like 16 flat at max rank. Just reducing their protections like that and just allowing everybody to do more damage, including yourself towards them, and the stats, right, giving you magical physical protection, some HP as well. Overall, I think it's just a very, very good item. And so I also have both the anti-heal items up here, is because kind of same thing with the pen items. If you are a carry, if you're going anti-heal, you pretty much have one option, right? Or at the very least a mid laner. A mid laner has like one option to anti-heal, and that is Divine. If they have, and Divine is really well statted too. Like if they have healing characters and healing's pretty strong right now, like go Divine. That's completely fine. Brawlers is really good, obviously, on junglers, like assassins or even like warriors. And then if you're a or like if you're an ability based ADC, that's fine too. But obviously, if you're an ADC, like regular one, then you probably go like the Xe glyph that anti-heals. But yeah, so like the anti-heal items are just going to be up here, the two main ones. Midgard, I kind of touched up on this a little bit earlier. Midgard, I think, is a really, really good physical item in a lot of cases. I almost always build this on, say, someone like Sobek that's really going in there. It helps to significantly reduce the enemy ADC's DPS, not by reducing their damage, but just by reducing their attack speed, right? And also kind of like screws with them a little bit too, because they're getting slowed as they auto attack you, and it just doesn't, it's not a good feeling for them. So it makes them harder to chase you. Same thing like Kali or Erlong, right? Assassins that like to stick on you, makes them harder to chase you because they're getting slowed as they auto attack you. And so overall, it's a very good item. Runeforge, I've always been a super big fan of Runeforge. Decreasing the amount of damage that they deal by 15% and increasing the amount of damage that you and allies deal to them by 15%. I mean, dude, that passive is insane. I've always thought Runeforge was a goated item. I think on most soul laners, especially ones that obviously have some sort of hard CC, because that's the only way it procs. But on most soul laners that have hard CC, I think you should go Runeforge. So finally, let's go ahead and hop on over to the S tier items. Here are S tiers. I know. Maybe some of you guys are gonna like it. Maybe some of you guys won't like it. I can explain. Compassion. Compassion, in my opinion, has always been the best support starter in the game. In fact, it's been one of the best starters in the game, period. With Compassion, you are reducing the damage your allies take next to you by 12%. It used to be 15% for the longest time, and they recently, over a couple patches ago, nerfed it down to 12%. Still very, very good. That means that allies that are next to you literally just get 12% damage reduction for free. And it's a very long range too. The range on it is actually longer than Sentinels. Sentinels like 55 units, Compassion's like 70. But just by standing like around you, they just get reduced damage for free, and you take that damage. Now you're a tank, so the damage that you take isn't really going to be too significant, right? Might be a couple hundred at most in a team fight. That's why Compassion's on this list. I think it's always been a pretty broken item. Some other people might disagree with that. I've always just thought, hey, this is like the best starter in the game. If you want to reduce or like really tank for your allies, like this is the go-to item every single time. It's gonna be better than Cloak, it's gonna be better than Thebes. I even did some testing with Zen in my Zen back when we were teaming, and we found that even if he was just solo, because remember Sentinels gets weaker the more allies around you because it like splits. So we found that even if he was just solo splitting Sentinels, Compassion was just like way tankier for him than Sentinels was. So overall, I think Compassion has just always been a great item. It's gonna be an S tier, it's going to remain S tier unless they really remove more mitigations from it. Next up, we have Shifters. Now, this has been a big debate amongst players recently. Shifters is absurdly broken. You're seeing 5 people go at every single game. You're seeing enemy ADC soul laners like Haddix, SOT, whoever, rocking builds that are playing ADCs in solo and going Shifters. You're even just seeing regular ADCs in the ADC duo lane going Shifters. The thing about Shifters right now is you get an insane amount of stats. So it's base stats. I'll have it top right, of course. Its base stats are just insane. You're getting 30 prots. You're getting 300 HP. You're getting like 20 HP 5. On top of that, you're getting 20 more prots right below 75 HP. So you get 50 prots total, which is an absurd amount. And then above 75 HP, you're getting like 45 magical power and like 30 physical power, pretty much. Like this is the item. Anybody can go it. It's very good on tanks right now. Tanks are in a very good spot, right? You can kill squishies, and you go an item like this that makes you absurdly tanky and gives you free power. Like you're seeing supports go this first sometimes. I wouldn't go it first, but I do go this on a few supports like Atlas or like even like Bacchus, who already gets free power in his kit. Oh my goodness. So Shifters is beyond broken right now. It's pretty much just going throughout the community. I could not rate this anywhere lower than S. Absolutely, like best item in the game probably currently that we're like really looking at. So if you are not on the Shifters train, hop on the Shifters train. It's insane. My last 2 items on here are going to be Soul Reaver and Kins. Now, I've had some people like tell me like, oh, why is Kins all the way up here and stuff like that, because I did post this tier list on like Twitter a little bit earlier. The thing about Kins and Reaver are that it is very hard. I'm not going to say impossible. It is very hard to kill a tank right now without these items as a squishy. And we're in a super heavy tank meta, in my opinion. Tanks are kind of like running the game. But like if you don't, for example, if you are an ADC and you're not going like crit build, if you're going to crit build, you're a little bit exempt from this. But if you're not going to full-on crit build and you're an ADC and you do not have Kins, you are not killing a tank. Or it's going to be very difficult to kill a tank. Kins is kind of like a must pretty much while you're playing ADC right now. And that's kind of why I have it under S, like broken, and Reaver as well. I think especially with like characters like Merlin and any character that can apply Reaver so many multiple times, like you're literally getting in a fight maybe even like 1,000+ damage from Reaver alone onto a tank. So these 2 items I think are kind of like, and it feels like a must, right, on like every mid laner for the most part if they do have a lot of tanks. So I do think like both these items kind of surpass the very good category. Like, obviously, if they weren't S tier, they'd be very good. But I do think they kind of surpass this very good category and are kind of broken because I think they should sort of be like in a tier on their own. And that's kind of why I have them up here. I think it's like these are just 2 items that you just are going every game. Kins, even you can build on assassins, you can build on warriors like Bologna that love Kins. So overall, I think that these 2 items deserve to sort of be in the broken category. I don't think they're as broken as, say, Shifter Shield, for example. I think Shifter Shield is probably like the top item right now, but I do think that these are very good. So this is the tier list from S to F. So let's go ahead and hop on over to the role item list. It's going to be obviously shorter, but I just kind of want to show you guys what I think are the top items for like each role in the game. Okay, so here's the role list. Now, I want to make this like perfectly clear for 1 second. You can go any one of these items. It doesn't matter, right? Like, these are items I kind of prefer in the role that I see built quite a bit, or I build quite a bit as well myself. And I'm also support main. Like, support is my main role. I'm alright at these other roles, but I'm a support main. Alright, so like some of this stuff I might say on these other roles, like maybe might not apply as much, but this is a nice little generalized like roadmap on what I think is like really good this season, is what I see from my ranked experiences. One thing I do want to, before we get into this, one thing I do really want to go over real quick is I forgot to add Pridwin to the other tier list. That's my fault. Pridwin would be in A tier. So very, very good. That's where I would put Pridwin. And because Pridwin is like your go-to cooldown item, it is insane. The glyphs, both glyph upgrades, Reverent or Glorious Pridwin, I think are both really, really good. So Pridwin is an A tier item for sure. So first thing I want to go over, and we're also obviously going to like be sharing some items amongst these roles, right? So first one I want to go over is support. Now, I already explained Boon and Compassion. I'm not really going to go over those again. I explained those earlier. And of course, like with Thebes, right? I'm just pretty much going to go this every game. It's so freaking tanky. The ones I really want to go over are Pridwin. Okay, so Pridwin is going to be your go-to cooldown item. I build Pridwin in most of my support builds. So either I'm building it early, and when I say early, maybe like 3rd item slot or so. Sometimes even 2nd, or I'm going to be building it later on in my item slots, like maybe like towards the end, 5th, 6th, 7th. No, I'm just kidding. Hopefully we get a 7th at some point. But Pridwin, I think, is like your go-to main cooldown item. So sometimes you can go breastplate, maybe like characters like Ardio, I think that use breastplate way better than Pridwin, but for the most part, Pridwin's your go-to cooldown item. So I would go this in almost every single support build at some point. We're in a like pretty cooldown centric meta, I think, right now. You really want to get your abilities up and running, and so you can cast them out way more frequent. Spear Robe is another one I wanted to go over. So Spear Robe is like, I just call Spear Robe like sort of like the cheaper like Walmart version of Prophetic. So Spear Robe gives you the same exact amount of mitigations Prophetic gives you, but only obviously once you get CC'd, you get it for about 3 seconds. But it procs pretty quickly, right? I mean, it procs every like 15 seconds, which on the grand scale of things isn't that bad. Prophetic was always better because you got the mitigations like all the time, right? But now that Prophetic's actually been nerfed, Spirit Robe gives you more mids now. Spirit Robe, I think, has always been a fantastic item, especially because you also get CCR. I would go this almost every single game, especially if they have heavy CC comps. Like Athena, like you want to go Prophetic, you can go at 2nd. It feels really nice. Pesty, I think, is going to be your go-to anti-heal item as a tank. Again, these can be paired to Soul Lane as well, like Pridwin, Prophetic, Pesty, all these items can really, they all get shared to some extent. Pesty, I think, is your go-to anti-heal item just because it gives you the most anti-healing, most bang for your buck. Contagion can be good, right? You get a little bit of offense with Contagion, but for the most part, I think I like more anti-heal than I do like some of the damage sometimes, so that's why I like Pesty. Unless like there are a lot of like physicals in their comp, then I'll go Contagion, but for the most part, Pesty I think is the go-to. And then like all these other items we obviously like went over. I like Relic Dagger a lot because again, Relic Dagger gives you CDR. Midgard really lets you be tanky, like really lets you get in there. It doesn't let the ADC inflict nearly as much damage on you as quickly as they could have before. And of course, like Binding gives you a little bit of offensive tools, so does Shifters, while still making you tanky. So for the most part, I think these are like the solid support items I would go. Next up to ADC. So ADC actually has a few different starters. I don't have Dominero on here. I actually have Leader's Cal and Death's Temper. Personally, I like going Dominero, but Dominero is a little bit rougher when it comes to the early game, like the T1 Gilded Arrow, the T1 version of it. It's a little bit rougher. These are going to let you get through lane a lot easier, especially Death's Toll. Death's Temper is still really high damage late game, but it's very conditional off of getting pretty much like killing a wave or killing some sort of like minions around, so you get those temper stacks. But I think like for the most part, these are probably going to be some of your top support ADC starters, just because They give you a ton of damage, attack speed. They're decent, like relatively speaking. They're actually really good in the early game, and they still scale to late game really well. And of course, like we went over Asi. Asi just gets built all the time over Devourer's Gauntlet. Now I think Devourer's actually still gives you a tad bit more damage, but Asi, you get your spike online way quicker, so you get the fight easier, and you also get more lifesteal overall because of the passive. So Asi, you're going pretty much every single game. Now, Rage, obviously, you're only going to go Rage if you're going to go a crit build. And of course, Demon Blade, obviously, you're only going to go these if you're going to go a crit build. But Rage is pretty much in every crit build right now. So, like, a solid, like, start to the build might be going Asi into Rage. That's a pretty solid start. And Asi also gives you attack speed, too, which is super nice, something that Devos doesn't give you. So it allows you to be a little bit more variable with that. And also, if you're going to go those, obviously going Dom is really nice, right? So like with Dom and Demon Blade together, you have 30% pen. Again, we talked about this earlier. Dom only applies to your auto attacks, but that's completely fine here because crit, right, is an auto attack. It's an enhanced auto attack essentially. So Dom is going to be good for the crit. Akival is another good start. So like if we're not going to be going crit builds and whatnot, like Akival is good. Like Akival Asi or Asi Akival, one of those two, I think is pretty decent. And of course, like going Hasten Katana at some point during both builds is always going to be really good. And of course, I'm an idiot, so I just cut to, let's just pretend that these two items were here the whole time, of course. Kins and Oboe, of course, are going to be your pen build. So if you're going to be going pen, you want to build Kins and Oboe, and of course, try to go into Titan's Bane as well, if you can fit that in. Especially if you're like a stem hunter like Rama, who gets like 2.5 attack speed late game anyways. It's really good if you go Titan's Bane. Also, this scales off Rama's ult too, so your ult as Rama is going to be hitting a lot harder, so you can hit the squishes actually a lot harder too with this. But for the most part, these are going to be like your main ADC items. And if you are going like a magical ADC, Ring of Hecate is really good, and some of the other rings as well. I wouldn't really go Telekind's ring. I don't think that's good, but like Cyclops ring is really good. It got a nice buff a couple patches ago. It does a really decent amount of damage. So you're going to be wanting to go these rings if you're, say, like maybe Freya or somebody like that. And also too, if you are a magical ADC, and keep this in mind, so Hasten Fatalis I don't think is like you have to build this every game kind of item, but if you are a mage ADC, this is very good on mage ADCs. I would build this almost every single game you're playing a mage ADC. Freya in particular just feels amazing with it. She always has, and she always will. She used to have Hasten ring, and now she has Hasten Fatalis, which doesn't give her, I think, as much damage, but now she gets it pretty much all the time whenever she wants to, so she's just going to feel amazing with it. So I would try to get this online a little bit earlier. Maybe in a regular hunter build, you could get this online a little bit later, maybe like 5th or 6th item, but if you're playing a mage ADC, I would get it online earlier, maybe 2nd or 3rd item. Should do you good. So next up we have mid. Now mid actually has a lot of really good starters, but I'm just kind of choosing 2 per role. That's kind of the theme that I'm doing here. These two I think are just the best. These two give out the most damage, and really what it means to be a mid laner in my opinion. But of course, right, you have times where you want to go top lane and all that kind of jazz, then that's completely fine. I think Gem of Focus is just probably the best one right now, and then Pendulum of the Ages is also really good. I think you sacrifice a little bit of damage, but you also get 20% CDR in return, and I think like a little bit more sustained too. So I think for the most part, these are the 2 best mage starter items, and the other ones are a little bit more situational. Doom Orb, I think I see Doom Orb almost every single game on mid laners right now. It gives you flat pen instead of percent pen, and you just get a ton of power with it, especially with the stacks and MS. I think this item should be built 9 times out of 10 mid lane on almost every single mage. I think you just do too much with it. It gives you too much damage. Reaver, we already went over Reaver. This should be getting built every single game to kill tanks. Only games I can see Reaver not getting built is, of course, if they have no tanks. Like if the enemy solo wants to goof off and play like Soul Solo, enemy support wants to goof off and play like Agni support, right? Like, yeah, you probably don't have to go Reaver. But in every other normal game that you go, Reaver's probably the best. Mirrodin's another really good item I see right now. It's very well statted, gives you decent power. Mirrodin's Rage is really good. It gives you increased damage after you ult. You get CDR from it, and you get percent pen from it. I think for the most part, this is like one of the best statted items in mid lane. It did get a nerf a little bit ago, and I think like it steered some players away from building it, but I think for the most part, it's still a really good item. You get cooldown and percent pen and power. It's like, what else do you want, right? Charon's coin, kind of like Upshard. You want to go either one of these or both of these if you want to, but you want to go either one of these every single game. You need the percent pen. Fun fact, like Titan's Bane, the passive from Upshard overcaps. And so here's what I mean by overcaps. The cap for percent pen is 40%. So if you build Charon's coin, which is 20, and Upshard, which is another 20%, you get that 40%. Upshard's passive, though, says that your next ability cast gives you an additional, like, it scales with an additional 20% pen on that ability. Then it has like a cooldown for like 10-15 seconds, something like that. That ability will not be capped off at 40% pen. It'll actually go all the way up to 60% pen, so it will do more damage. That ability will do a lot more damage, so just kind of keep that in mind. Like, you can still go both these items and make really good use from Upshard. Next up, we have Divine Ruin, your premier anti-heal item. Not really much to say about that. That gets built whenever they have healers. And then Deso I see get built pretty much every game. I think Deso has been like one of the staple mid lane items for years now at this point, I think. You are getting good power stats. You're getting cooldown stats. Its passive is really good, especially if you're snowballing a fight. It allows you to snowball even harder. And then, of course, you're getting flat pen. The entire logic of Deso, I think, is just really good as an item. Power, pen, cooldown. If you have those 3 stats, kind of like with Mirrodin a little bit, I think for the most part, safe to say it's a very good item. And it's a good early game item too. Like, you can go this first, right? You can go it second, whatever the case. But I would build this at some point in the early game. Last but not least, Ratatouille. Build Ratatouille whenever you want. You can build it instead of Mirrodin if you want to, if you're like kind of overcapping cooldown. So you go like Chronos' Pendant, then you can like go it if you want instead of Mirrodin, that kind of stuff. But I think Ratatouille is really good if you are playing sort of like tick-based characters like Merlin, maybe, that has nice little scaling on that, but not as good as like one-hit based characters like Scylla, for example, that might do like a ton of burst damage at once, but might not make use of the passive as well. So that kind of stuff, I would just kind of keep that in mind. But for the most part, I think these are going to be your solid mid lane items, and of course, you can go the other ones here and there situationally, depending on, you know, how your build's going, what character you're playing, so on and so forth. So for jungle, I didn't really know which starters to put up here. I did know that I want to put Spear. I think Spear is actually one of the best starters, but for the second one, I didn't really know if I want to put Boomba's Hammer or like Protector. A lot of people have told me like Protector just isn't what it used to be. I believe them. I think Boomba's Hammer is really good, so we're just going to kind of go to Spear and Boomba's Hammer. These are 2 different branches of the same exact tree, your T1 starter. So you can go either one of these. I think they're good. I really like Spear for the most part, but depending on if you're an auto attack based assassin, right, you're going to want to be going with things like Stone Cutting Sword, Serrated Edge, that kind of stuff. And maybe like Boomba's Hammer as well. Or if you're more ability based, you're going to want to fit in more of like the Hydras, the Crusher, the Jotuns, especially. I like going Jotuns a lot. The Titan's Bane, the Heartseeker, the Bloodforge can be on either or, it doesn't really matter. And of course, Brawlers too. You need to go anti-heal. Hasten is also pretty good on junglers as well, right? Like, so they took out Hasten Katana and Hasten Ring, and it's all now just Hasten Fatalis. So you can build Fatalis on junglers, auto attack junglers if you want as well to stick on the targets, like maybe a Bakasura, characters like that really abuse auto attacks. A Kaival as well can be decent on some of these junglers. So some of these items, like I said, mix, but for the most part, I think these are your solid jungle items. I think Bloodforge is probably on the upper end. Like, I think Bloodforge is really good no matter what assassin you're playing, and it really allows you to pop off in a fight. I mean, your goal as an assassin isn't necessarily to do the highest amount of damage. I mean, you guys ever see your jungler pop off with like 20 kills, and then you go to the end of the game, it's like, wait, this guy has like 15k damage, I'm at like 25k, what the hell happened, right? They're stealing a lot of the kills, right? And that's completely fine. That's kind of how the jungle plays a little bit. Now they do a lot of damage, don't get me wrong, but like, that's what happens here and there. Bloodforge obviously helps you to excel in the fight, because like, your job is to be getting kills in the first place. You build Bloodforge, you're getting kills, and now you're getting extra HP shield that also gives you MS. Like, it's a win-win. So I think like Bloodforge for the most part is one of the jungle's better items, and you should be building it practically like every single game. Soul Lane, again, another little starter iffy situation. I know Redstone is really good, and so is Brooch. I think it kind of just depends on who you're going. Like, I personally like Redstone on Mulan. I know other people like Brooch. Some other people might like Axe on her. Some auto attack based characters like maybe Amma or Osiris might like Acts of Animosity. So like, it really just kind of depends your style. Oh, I meant to take off the sigil. But I think for the most part, you should be going Shield of the Phoenix. If you're an auto attack based warrior, I think that going like Frostbound would be really good for you, right? Really beneficial. If you have a lot of hard CC, I mentioned this earlier in the tier list, but Runeforge I think is really good. And of course, if you're an auto attack based warrior, Shogun is going to be nice, right? And then of course, we're going to mix match some items. Shifters pretty much every game, I think. Pridwin's also really good. Going Glorious Pridwin, which is the left Pridwin, I believe. The left Pridwin upgrade. It's the red one. It gives you a little bit of extra damage. So if you're... The way I decide between the 2 Pridwins is... If you go like red Pridwin, it'll have 2 explosions. It'll have an initial explosion when you first cast the ult. So if you have an ult that kind of gets up close and personal to them, that explosion's going to hit them. If you don't have an explosion that does that, or if you don't have an ult that does that, then I would go the blue one. The blue one's going to give you more survivability, higher shield, right? because based off more of your protections. So that's how I kind of distinguish between the two. But I think like with a lot of soul laners, like maybe Osiris who jumps in there. I don't know when the Pridwin procs, but I would assume it would proc when he lands. So if that's the case, then I would go the red Pridwin. But you know, this kind of stuff. So a lot of these items are interchangeable, but for the most part, I think like, you know, binding some of these items I think are the best in soul lane. I would almost always go right now at the very least Shield of the Phoenix and shifters, mostly shifters, but Shield of Phoenix too, I think, on most characters. And binding I think is really good. But this would be like my item tier list essentially for each of the roles. I didn't want to make this too long because the other tier list was a little bit long, but I think that this for the most part would be what I would go per role at some variation of these items. And again, doesn't mean you can't build these items. Like I build Abyssal, I build our Shroods, especially on some auto attack based solos. Our Shroods is really good right now. They have a lot of shielding. I tend to go into Erosion, right? So really just depends. Honestly, I'm going to shove Onis here as well because I think Onis is really good on soul laners. But these I think for the most part are what I would pick. So in any case though, guys, that's going to be the tier list. Thank you all so much for watching. I appreciate it. This was a for fun tier list, but it does have like also good implications to it too. Like what items that I think are actually really good right now that get built. I see get built practically every single game, and everything on this list does to some extent. Hopefully this helps out you guys. And yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed. Until next time, see you.